Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Baka podcast.
Baka. It's amazing how every time you open your mouth, you prove you're an idiot.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to an episode of Baka. We are an anime podcast that every 2 weeks we watch a new anime. We come together, we talk about it, we review it like we're a book club, and then we turn our discussion over to our Twitter followers, our comment section, even our email. So please listen in, follow along, and then tell us why we're wrong, because that is what this podcast is all about. You guys are the smarter ones. We just plant the seeds of the growth of your corn stalks.
This got weird.
It kind of got dirty. I don't know why. Okay, maybe I'll fix that in editing. Probably not. To talk about the anime that we watched, I need to introduce my co-host. First off, we have the Blue Mage to my Dragoon, Jeremy.
Heck yeah. That's awesome.
I thought you'd like that one.
Yeah,
How are you?
Yeah. Adapt to the monsters. I'm doing pretty good. Actually, I'm really excited because this was spring break. One of the weeks was spring break. Yay. So I didn't have to do anything with school. And I spent that time transferring over my RimWorld mod to version 1.0. So now it actually works with RimWorld 1.0. So now I can actually start working on that a little bit more when I get some time. So,
nice.
Yeah.
I am super excited.
Another step closer to you having to buy it. It will happen one day.
Someday.
Yep.
We also have the Bard to my Summoner, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Oh, my speed went up. Thank you.
Gotta own it.
Right?
Yep.
Path of Exile started a new league. What was it, last week? And it is unfortunately not being taken well by the community, but I'm having a blast.
What?
Oh.
Why is the community not happy?
Because they're a community. And
Right.
That's what happens.
Well, no, you get the usual complainers here and there with every league, but map drops seem to be really low RNG right now, so people are having a hard time progressing. And there's so many mechanics now that are crammed into the past 2 seasons that people are just like, all right, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, and they're like, I'd have a second job. But the new mechanic's cool. It's based off this guy's like lost memories, like he can't remember, and so you dive into his mind to fight monsters, and you get these little pieces that you get to place in like a board to get around to loot. But what's cool is these things are destabilizing, so as you go in it, the map is disappearing on you, like it's crumbling away in this blue, like a digitized crumbling away, so you have to run from it or you get caught up in it and you get kicked out of the zone.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
So,
It kind of reminds me of the darkness for the mining one.
except it doesn't murder you.
Yeah, that's true. It just kicks you out.
Right.
It's friendly.
How's Troy?
My name is Troy, and I'm doing great. I beat the story of Devil May Cry 5, which I've beaten every Devil May Cry story-wise, and so felt good. It was a nice, bring everything to a good resolution. They could actually end the story here and be good. I think they probably won't, but they could. And if you're a fan of Dante or Virgil or Nero and their story, this was a good one. And now I'm working my way through the higher difficulty, trying to get to the even higher difficulty, because that's what you do when you play Devil May Cry. You just keep cranking it up. And what's really nice is when you raise the difficulty, you play the level over again, but when you get to hey, here's where the monsters are, it's not the same monsters with more health. They're like, oh, here's a new combination of monsters. Here's a monster we didn't usually introduce till the end of the game who can heal everybody else. And now he's there. And also these 5 guys and maybe these 2 speed guys, can you handle this?
Nice.
So that's been fun.
That's cool.
That's what I've been up to. And also we've been watching the anime we're here to talk about, Goblin Slayer. Now, we did give a mature content warning, and that did prove to be necessary with this. So if you are here to decide if you're going to watch it, do know, especially in the very first episode, there is a mature content graphic scene. But with that said, we will kind of skirt around that as non-controversially as we can. But let's go to our non-spoilery reviews. Jason, this was your anime pick. What did you think of the anime?
What's really funny is we had planned to, this is one of the few animes we planned to we're actually going to watch. And I forgot about that. And I watched the sub, which I thought was fantastic. And so then it came around to this and I was like, let's watch it again. And I watched it in dub and I thought it was fantastic. I really liked the anime. It has some great underlying questions about just consequence, along with a good story and great characters. So besides the mature content, it was pretty great.
Jeremy, how about you?
I really enjoyed it, and the mature content didn't bother me at all. It really fit with the dark fantasy aspect of the story. As a matter of fact, I thought it was kind of interesting that it leads with a really strong content, but then it doesn't actually stay that bad most of the time. Like it dips nearly into it some episodes here and there, but
we're going to talk about that when we get into it. We will comment on it. What did you think of the anime overall, though?
Well, overall, I thought it was really good. I enjoyed seeing a character that wasn't necessarily, the regular hero that you might expect, making choices and going after things that you might not normally expect from the regular hero. That was cool.
For me, review-wise, it took me a little while to get into it. Characters are a big thing for me, especially lately, and these characters are specifically kept kind of plain.
Very generic.
Yeah, in my opinion. And that hurt my attachment to the anime, but once it got going, it was definitely presenting something new in the fantasy world. There's a ton of references to other fantasy series, both Western and Eastern, that I enjoyed being mixed all together and where they were coming from. And I really enjoyed kind of just diving into what this was all about. So I would say this was a pretty good anime. And I think I would be up for watching the sequel if it showed up.
Definitely.
Okay, so the opening and the closing songs, what did you guys think of those?
I liked them both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
And I really liked the visuals of the opening. They weren't too revealing. So that's one of my pet peeves lately with watching the animes that we've been watching is like you can get cues of story beats through the openings with certain characters either being there or missing, or certain scenes where two characters look at each other. I didn't get any of that with this. This was very much, this is the viewpoint from an overarching standpoint instead of deep into the story.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It did leave us with a few questions with the opening. Like, man, there's a lot of dice, and is 4 matter, and like, what's going on here? Is the 1 important? And I like that. It was ambiguous enough, just like you're saying. It didn't really expose a lot, but it just kind of hinted at the broader themes. And it was really good. And I love the music. It took me a couple episodes probably to get to like the opening's music, but I really liked it after that. It's got that good dissonant quality.
I super love the opening. I love how it starts off very slow and operatic, and then just kind of starts thumping and getting, pace picks up as the action in the opening goes. But yeah, those dice images, that dice is such a big feature of the theme of the story, and then to have it being featured so much in the OP, I was looking at it every time like, do the dice change? What do the dice mean? Which, if you have to watch something over and over, having something that makes it interesting doesn't hurt.
What's really great about this particular world is it harkens back to old style D&D real strong. Like the dice imagery, casters they have so many slots per day and then they have to rest. The monsters are very from that world, and it was such a nostalgia trip to watch it, at the same time watching something brand new. So it kind of a mixture. And as far as the mature content, I think if you're down with Game of Thrones, you're probably down with this anime. I mean,
yeah, you could.
I didn't see anything that was worse than it, or sometimes as close to as bad as Game of Thrones.
If the first episode doesn't turn you off, that is as bad as it gets.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I mean, plus the fact that it's goblins doing all the atrocities, it's not people. So that kind of puts things into a different perspective. A lot of time it's harder when you're dealing with people being the horrific individuals. But if it's goblins, they're just like, they look like demons. Actually, it's monsters. It's what you expect.
So before we get out of before spoiler area, that's one thing I kind of wanted to bring up a little bit is how this anime makes monsters monstrous again.
Yeah.
There's been quite a few anime lately that it's just like, oh, monster.
They're just misunderstood.
These things show and give consequence. If it's like, what happens if they win?
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, go on, Troy.
Well, I don't. With what Jeremy said, I don't know if I fully agree. Like I said, I want to keep this as uncontroversial as possible, so we're going to barely touch on it when it comes up in the story, but I will get everyone their chance to say. But what's interesting about what you just said, Jason, is our next anime, which is the slime one, and we'll officially announce it at the end of the podcast. Goblins are like the heroic side characters that team up with the slime. So we're going from like the most vile version of goblins to a guy who leads a tribe of goblins and it helps them evolve into hobgoblins.
Oh my god!
So that's going to be quite a shift.
Yeah, that's going to be funny.
And then you have a mixture of the two and Overlord. That's really funny.
Yeah.
So let's go to the spoiler section. So from here on out, we are going to reveal everything that's happened in the plot. We're going to reveal characters, themes, and spoil everything. So if you have not seen it, now is the time to decide if you want to, or you just go along with us as we regale you with the tale of the Goblin Slayer and the really dirty, dirty goblins.
Did you like get the song ready? Because there's a song. The bard sings a song, Troy.
No, I will not be singing. I am not the bard here.
Oh,
there you go.
Okay.
Don't worry, Troy. I've got your sound effects for you.
So, like Jason pointed out, this world, the best way to picture it is just classic D&D. It is basically a classic D&D world, and that's all you need to know. You know, there's classes, there's guilds, there's monsters, there's even D&D monsters. And they even say, like, this world was built by the gods just rolling dice to create the world. And that everything that's going on is just a game for the gods. I kept waiting to find out that this actually just was Dungeons and Dragons, and that it would, like, pull back and we'd see, like, 5 nerds at a table. And I say that lovingly as a nerd who's been at the table.
It zooms out, and it's just Puffin Forest's gaming group.
Nice.
And then like the game master turning to the guy who plays Goblin Slayer, like, dude, you got to go on a regular quest. I have all this content. Yep. That's honestly what I thought was going to happen.
Stop trying to railroad me, man. I want to kill goblins.
I should say the writer of this was Hideki Kurata and Yosuke Kuroda. They both were the anime screenplay writers for Made in Abyss and Drifters.
Oh, wow.
So some
see a lot of
there.
inspiration.
And then the studio was White Fox, who's done Akame ga Kill, ReZero, and Steins Gate. So some big favorites of ours.
Haven't they also done Kisniver?
No, that would be Trigger.
I guess when I hear Akame ga Kill,
you just want everyone to have made Kisniver.
Oh yeah.
So Jason has to just always watch something associated with Kisniver.
Yeah.
I swear, if I ever see a shipping chart again.
Yeah.
The first character we're introduced to is actually the priestess, who is a rookie, a noob, coming in and joining the Adventurers Guild for the first time. She's given the lowest rank, and they're like,
porcelain class. I love that as a rank. You don't ever want to send someone who's porcelain class into combat at all.
I like that they talk a lot about the ranks, and I like that we never really meet like ultimate ranked people. Because if you were ultimate rank, that would be mind blowing. And so, like, the fact that there's a silver, which is still really high but not tippity top, is a big deal. Like, oh my god, that guy's a silver. And I like how they played that. Again, we're dealing with old school D&D, but we're not with the main characters. We are off with the NPCs while they're waiting for the main characters to show up. That's really how this story is presented. So first is this priestess. What did you guys think of her?
I thought there was an interesting line when we first meet her, because she comes up to the counter and she and basically like they start taking her information. She's like, 15, and now that I'm an adult. And I was like,
wait, what?
Wait, what? So apparently,
welcome to Japan.
Right. Apparently, there are different standards at different ages. But if in this world she's considered an adult, well, we get to make adult decisions and deal with the adult consequences. But I actually liked this take of the mousy, not very confident anime girl. Her arc is I really enjoyed watching her grow, and even near the end she's not this stalwart ready to battle hardened ready to slay stuff. Like, she's still unsure, but she grows tremendously, and I actually really like this particular character.
Yeah, I thought she was a pretty good character. The things that she has to go through, and yet she keeps repeating again and again, it's my decision. I'm deciding this. I'm coming with you because I want to, right? Because essentially Goblin Slayer, as we find out, is very much a you do you kind of guy. I could use your help, sure, but I'm not going to force you. If you want to come help me, it's up to you. You do you. And so she has to constantly make that decision. So she is always evaluating whether or not, is this the right decision? And regardless, she always goes. So,
well, I love there's a scene where he's like, he's gonna go on a quest, and she's like, hey, I'm ready to go, and he's like, no, you need to stay and rest. And in reality, what he said in his own head was, I don't think you should come with me, you should probably rest, but it's your decision. And she goes, we need to have a discussion about this. He's like, aren't we having a discussion right now? He's just like completely socially
That's actually my favorite thing about her character, is that she seems to be the one who's most willing, especially at first, to call the Goblin Slayer out on his BS. Everyone kind of just lets him be his lone wolf self. Mostly ignores him. He's the weird guy who only cares about goblins. Everyone else is just kind of ignoring him or doesn't care. And she's like getting up in his face like, you're being a jerk, or we need to have a discussion. We are a team. I thought we were having a discussion. No, if there's a discussion, you would present me options and we will discuss those options. And that she's really a big catalyst for his growth as a character. Yes. Herself, she's like I said, most of the characters are a little bland, and I found her a little one note. But there's about halfway through, maybe a little past that, she has a major breakdown, I guess, a failing of her, all this like building up her courage and her strength, and then she, like, everything just goes bad for her. And I really like that she slipped, that it wasn't just a straight line of character growth for her. It's kind of an up and down thing, and that she's not quite perfect and not always ready for it.
But I like that by the end she finds her spark of courage again. Yep. I did like that.
Oh yeah.
All right, so she gets recruited basically by a bunch of other rookie adventurers. They're like, hey, we're pretty new ourselves, but we're gonna go take down goblins. We figure goblins are super easy to deal with.
I scared one off in my hometown.
Yep, one the warrior is like, hey, yeah, I once scared one away from my village, and the monk girl is like, I can kill one with my bare hands. They're so weak. So these four, there's a warrior, there's a mage, and a monk, and then she would be their priestess. And they call out, she has 3 spells a day, where basically she says a prayer, and she can heal right now, I think is all she can do. Or maybe she has light.
She has light as well. I really loved this scene because it was, again, back to the D&D thing. It was as if you had drawn up 4 fresh character sheets. Yes. And then they're like, we're going to go straight into combat. And it's like, oh.
and okay. This is why you learn not to name your first level characters in D&D.
Yeah, we should call that out before we get more into the story. No one in this anime has a name. They're everyone is their title, everyone is their class, everyone is their race. That is very, very on purpose. And it took me a while to get what that purpose is. And I think we should get into it later, but
there's a funny thing too about I don't know if it was actually if they were trying to point at this or not, but in the old versions of D&D, the races were actually part of your class too. So like the elven archer was a class. You couldn't be like an elven warrior or anything like that. So I don't know. It just with the people that he runs into later, it just kept reminding me of that rule constraint, and it was quite funny to me.
So when I call her priestess, that is the closest thing to a name there is for her. It was a little odd for me taking notes because I would usually like write her name and then right next to it the priestess. But I would write priestess and be like, well, that also pretty much describes her, doesn't it? I don't really need to do anything else after that. So I have no description written after the names that I put down in my notes, and it feels bad.
So I actually went to the website where they make the manga and the anime, and I wanted to see what they named the characters, what they called them. And the girl on the farm that we're going to meet later, they literally call her Cowgirl.
She's Cowgirl.
Yeah. Her name is Cowgirl. And like on the cover of the manga, it actually has a picture of priestess, and it just says priestess. I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah, the names I wrote in the notes are pretty close to what I think they actually used for their names. Like they might be Lizard Warrior or something.
Yeah,
witch. Lizard.
Yep.
So, but yeah, again, very deliberate, very on purpose. Yeah. So these adventurers go down into the cave, and they kind of get separated after some lollygagging. And they get ambushed by a group of goblins, and things just go really, really bad for them.
Real fast.
Really fast. The mage gets stabbed and kind of goes catatonic. The warrior rushes in and kills a few, but then his big sword hits the roof of the cave, and they manage to take him down as well, brutally murdering him. And then the monk gets beaten, and this is the scene that everyone talked about when this anime decided to air. Again, so my personal thoughts on it was we are presented with a dark fantasy anime world, and it's very much to make these goblins, show you how monstrous these goblins are. For my personal taste, I thought this was a little bit graphic in this first episode, but afterwards, where they more just kind of insinuate. And you like, yeah, I get what you're saying. I thought that was well done. That was, but that's my personal taste.
I agree with you. I think what was interesting is if we notice there are no female goblins,
right? Yeah, and they even call out multiple times. I'm gonna go make more with my prisoners,
right? And the thing is that in all the RPGs I've ever played, or like other fantasy type, like have media that has goblins in them, they don't. It's very rarely do we touch on how do they reproduce, how do they make more, because there's always hordes and hordes and hordes of them. I mean, look at the Hobbit, right, where they go down into the caves. This not only presented a reason or a function of how it happened, but also a reason why they're kidnapping women. Not just because they're obviously they are evil and vile and disgusting, but this is also a necessity to fill their ranks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's how they reproduce. It's actually, I thought that was a very interesting take on it because, like you pointed out in Lord of the Rings, they had the Uruk-hai down there that were like grown out of wads of something out of the sides of the walls, right? And so they could have gone whatever direction they wanted. But I actually respect that they decided to incorporate it in to the relationship with the humans, to give them a motivation. Like they aren't just a plague that's produced by nature. They're not produced by magic. Wherever they came from, whatever their source is, the reason for their horrid behavior and atrocities is because they are trying to reproduce. And also, I thought it was very interesting the way that the humans, at least, shared stories about them was they used them as the behave yourself or you'll become a goblin. Don't be jealous. Don't be greedy. Don't
the boogeyman.
People. Yes, they were the boogeyman. And it makes perfect sense how all of these things tied together with the way they represented them. They seemed more like demons to me, like little mini demons, than I have ever seen goblins portrayed. And to me, that was actually a very interesting take. Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love the take of how evil they are, and like I said, I do think there's very much a reason why they're portrayed in this. So that when you have a man who's willing to slaughter their babies, like you're like, okay, yep, I 100% get it. The only thing that was weird to me is that when the adventurers, you're like, hey, let's go deal with goblins, or any of the other regular characters, not Goblin Slayer himself, the men are like, yeah, and the women are like, yeah, and I'm like, if I was one, I'd be like, no. You know what they do to us? Hell no. Send a male party. Screw that. I'll go fight demon lords.
Yeah. And it's so weird because it's almost like they don't seem to take them seriously, because even you have the veteran adventurers, and they're like, go take care of goblins. What? Why bother? Nobody takes them seriously. Yeah. And the young adventurers, we see the girl that is, the guild girl that's handing out quests behind the counter. When they say, oh yeah, we're going to go down to the goblin pits, you watch her face. She's looking at him like, no, don't pick that one. Don't pick that one. So like, why is it not more well known? It's almost like they just kind of either turn a blind eye or they're not aware. Like, it doesn't leave the goblin nest.
I think it's more of a commentary of how these RPGs are done. What are some of the lowest things you fight? Boars, goblins, kobolds, right. And you go from that to the next tier of monster, which might be minotaurs, which would be next tier monster, which would be demons, and then lords of some kind, right? And once you're at that next tier of monster, you don't want to fight the little monsters anymore, because think about it. In that first scene, every single one of them except Priestess killed a handful of them fairly easily. It was their numbers that outwitted them, and also they were inexperienced, so they made some dumb strategic decisions as well. As far as never split the group.
That's right.
Never split the group. But yeah, it came down to lack of experience and also numbers. But that shows you, even from the warriors' perspective, I chased one off from my farm. They were able to kill these things fairly easily, just like any other adventurer. But they don't take the threat seriously because they don't realize what kind of danger and threat they can be. I think in this particular world, because they mainly attack farms and villages and outlying rural areas.
I did think it was really interesting how you hear someone in the Adventurers Guild say, hey, I went over and I did this thing and I really boosted up my XP. And I'm going to gain another level. And that kind of puts another light on the goblins too, because why take them out if you're trying to get your XP up as fast as possible? And that's the thing, there's just no point in it.
I also really enjoyed the idea that this anime seems to be presenting that almost kind of made me feel like a little masochistic for enjoying stuff like Lord of the Rings or just Dungeons and Dragons of like, the Hobbit got past the spiders in the woods, but what about the next innocent villagers who walk into those woods? Why are you enjoying this? This is a horrible, horrible thing. And that I kind of got that sense. And with this being so graphic and violent, and they really like make you realize these things are horrible, even if they're low level nothing. The fact that they even exist is horrible to someone. Made me feel like, man, I feel bad for going after the Demon Lord in that one game I played. Do
you remember in Recreators, remember the Paladin and how she, out of her world, is like, why would people make a world like this?
Right.
I was getting flashbacks to that scene as I was watching this.
So after Priestess runs away, we are then introduced to the warrior who saves her, who is the Goblin Slayer. He comes in with his big glowing eye, which is just his rage, I guess.
Well, she's about to get overrun herself.
Yeah,
before he comes in.
she's carrying out the mage, and she gets hit by an arrow, and so she falls. And yeah, they're coming at her, and the Goblin Slayer comes in and manages to slay a bunch of them and kill them. And help her out. And he actually kills the mage and puts her out of her misery because we find out they use poison and she was already dying. But this is the time to talk about Goblin Slayer himself. So what did you guys think of our protagonist hero character?
I love this character for multitudes of reasons, but I think the biggest thing that sticks out to me is his convictions. I think his revenge turned into conviction, because it stopped being about getting back at them and more about exterminating a evil within the world that everyone else was turning a blind eye to, or at least that's what it seemed to be to me. His social ineptitude is hilarious to watch, but also endearing, and it's nice to watch him grow as a character, even though it's very tough to see in some scenes. But yeah, I love that, because so he's silver rank, and we have quite a few silver ranks in the guild hall. They've got like really great looking armor. They've got huge swords, some enchanted, and here he is with this tiny, just iron sword,
short sword too.
And it is shorter than a short sword. He grinds them down specifically so he can swing them well in a cave. His entire outfit is designed for cave diving into specifically goblin layers. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this character.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. The more they revealed about his childhood and what he had gone through, and even his thought process as a kid, the more fascinating I found him. We learned that he actually had a fear when he was younger that the earth would open up and swallow him in, like just with a step. And to me, what that said was that either like he had some kind of very overactive imagination, or else he maybe had something a little bit off upstairs in his head, like maybe his perception of the world was just a little bit tweaked. And then when he went through what he did, because it was quite traumatic, and I'm sure we'll get into it later, but he gets a reason to take on the goblins and kill them all. That would just further break a person like that. And then to go on even further with his other steps, which, we'll get into it. He proves to be such a fascinating character that I get the roboticness, how really he exists for one purpose, and that is to right the wrong that was done to him so it can't be done to anybody else. And yeah, it's absolutely noble. And it's really fascinating to me how something so noble can also be perceived and mocked by other people, because they don't comprehend exactly what he's doing or why he's doing it. They don't see the value in it. It's very interesting. Also, he's not really as proficient just in combat as other silver rank people are. We really get to see that later. Mm-hmm. If you compare combat to combat between the last episode and then what he goes through in the middle of the season, he wins because of his mind, because of his tactical approach and unorthodox methods. And I absolutely love that. I thought this was really, really, really well done.
I will bring up his tactics when we get to the scene where it shows his training too, because I really want to. Mm-hmm. I really loved what that brought out. For me, Goblin Slayer, again, just like the anime, he's hard to get a hold of. Robotic characters are hard for me to connect to. Mm-hmm. But thematically and conceptually, what this character is, I love. He's basically medieval Batman. He had a tragedy, and he becomes obsessed with carrying out a pursuit of revenge or justice because of that tragedy. What question just popped into my mind when Jason was talking is, do you think he would save someone? Would he go on would he go save Cowgirl from trolls? If like, hey, Cowgirl's been abducted by trolls, or your village is being attacked by trolls, is he carrying enough to go, or is he like, yeah, but that's not goblins?
I think if it was Cowgirl, yes. If it was literally anyone else, he would put out a quest.
Yeah,
someone else would do it.
Yeah, maybe by the end of the first season, he might do it for at least Priestess too, but I can't see anybody else.
It's just because Jason said that, he does this for a good reason, but is it really a good reason, or is it just vengeance? If he's not willing to do anything else to save anyone else.
Oh, I think it's a good reason, because he's not doing it to save people right now. He's doing it because of the bigger picture. He's saving as many people as possible by exterminating a menace that is going to wipe out untold numbers. And if he was constantly running to save whoever from whatever, he would actually miss the opportunity to clean up this menace. So I think he's evaluating it as being more good than...
I think it's twofold. I think it's that plus revenge. I think he has just an immense amount of hatred for these things because of the past.
I do agree that I think he changes in by the end of the anime. I do think that there's growth there. But in the beginning, the way he ignores, like you said, the big picture, but he's also ignoring so many other big pictures. And you could say, well, he figures someone else has that. But I don't even think he thinks that far. He's like, I don't care if the world is ending or not. All I care is killing goblins. And I don't think he really cares about the long-lasting effects of it. He just wants to exterminate goblins 100% for himself.
I don't think that's true. Because in the conversation that he has with the Ranger Elf and the other two members when they come to recruit him, he says, I don't care about this bigger problem that you guys are talking about. There's a whole military and everything is devoted to solving that. The military doesn't come with goblins. No, they don't get sent. So who is there to clean it up? Just first level adventurers that go in, half of them dying in the goblin caves or supplying them with new breeding. So he's basically going and dealing with something that nobody else wants to deal with. And without him, the problem just goes out of control like a cockroach infestation. So that's where I think he's looking at it as this is a mess that I've personally experienced and it's going on everywhere. Like in the final episode, we actually find out that the guy who looks like Butts, right?
Guts.
Guts.
Butts.
God, it's been so long.
I wouldn't mistake his name to his face for sure.
No.
The guy who looks like Guts from Berserker. I got that right. We find out that Goblin Slayer went and cleaned up the goblins that attacked his village. So why did he have to go do that? If this was a problem that adventurers were taking care of, then he wouldn't have had to travel and go take care of that. I imagine that happens a lot. I don't think that was an isolated incident. So that's where I think that he genuinely does see it as something that no one's trying to fix. And so he's the final solution.
I agree with that mostly, except for I just don't think he's doing it I just don't see any goodwill behind it. Like if it helps people, that's fine. But at the end of the day, what matters to him is that he gets to kill the goblins. If there was a way like to send them all back home peacefully so they would never attack Earth again, or he could go in and slay them, I think he chooses the slaying. I think there's a vengeance over greater good happening, especially in the beginning. Just because of how he ignores other greater goods, it just doesn't seem to add up. But I could be wrong, and I do see your point.
Yeah, I definitely think that the vengeance is a large part of it. Absolutely agree with that.
Okay,
I agree because in that conversation with his other three companions he gets, he specifically calls out that there will always be other people to do those things. But I think you're right, Troy. I think he finds immense amounts of pleasure every time he sticks a blade into one of these things.
He does also say, I don't care if the world ends.
Right, because he says that if the world, before the world ends, the villages and the rural areas are going to burn to the ground, and we're going to have a goblin infestation before that even happens.
Okay. So I'm gonna go back into the story.
Okay.
He saves her, and then basically we get a crash course on him slaying goblins. He rushes the nest. He kills their shaman, draws more out to a area he wants to fight. Uses fire, which the priestess is like, that's really stupid. we're in a very closed space. But he basically kills everyone. They save the monk. They manage to rescue her. And they find a secret compartment with goblin babies inside of it, and then he kills the goblin babies. He points out, this is very important to the story, that a lot of times people let the goblin babies live because they're babies, but they hold grudges, and they're smart enough that they grow from that experience, and they usually become the shamans, the champions, the leaders of the new nest. That a wandering goblin becomes almost more has a chance to become more powerful than a regular goblin.
I think there's one thing that is also impressed upon the viewer in this is that the very first group that goes in, they are very headstrong, even though they have zero experience. They're like, oh, goblins, easy. Goblin Slayer not only shows them respect as far as their fighting ability, but is way more cautious. He's like, no, we can't go in there. We will die. We'll draw them out. And that's one staple of this show that I love is his tactics.
I love the use of their weapons. Like, if I keep using my weapon, my weapon will get degraded or my weapon will get messed up. If I use their weapons, I have unlimited resources. And then this comes back up in another one where when he has a party and they realize like, oh, he's using their weapons. That's actually really clever and smart. But they pointed out here. But basically then the episode ends with them back at the guild, and the priestess comes back in. She's all better, and she joins Goblin Slayer on a quest. I would say this is the beginning of his character change, because I think Goblin Slayer in his mind is a lone wolf. I do this, no one else does this, no one else cares. And then the priestess is the first one to start changing his mind that someone else can care about this too, which will carry an arc all the way through till the end when everyone decides to join in to battle goblins, which he doesn't think can happen.
It kind of struck me as maybe he's wearing his armor all the time, including the helmet at all times, because he's trying to isolate himself from the world. Psychologically, there seemed to be so much of I'm different from everybody else because of what I've experienced that I don't know, that just really seemed like a strong possibility to me for his character. Yeah, it really comes into play in the last few episodes, where he takes his helmet off for the first time in public. But yeah, it's kind of cool.
So in the next episode, we get the start of a flashback with a young boy who we find out is Goblin Slayer and his young friend. They get in an argument over her wanting to buy him a present when she goes to town, and then bad things happen after she goes to town. We then meet this girl in the current time, and she lives in the same tiny little farm that Goblin Slayer resides in with her uncle, where Goblin Slayer also pays rent. This is Cowgirl.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Thoughts on Cowgirl? Not those kind of thoughts, Jim.
Yeah.
They knew what they were doing. Every other shot with her, she's bathing, or she's getting up, or she's propping herself at the window.
Yeah, like I told you guys in the message, that with a dark and gritty story, having anime fan service and harems kind of start showing up, I was like, that
you're taking me out.
Yeah, you pick one. Either we're gonna be How to Summon a Demon Lord, or we're gonna be Game of Thrones. But I don't want to be both at the same time. That's just, it feels bad.
I thought her character was a bit flat. Not really, though.
Why? Why would you do that to us?
She serves a narrative mechanism, but she doesn't seem to have much of a story herself. She serves as the grounding point for him, which I do like. Because she tries to make, when he's home, she tries to make his life as normal as possible. And I actually appreciated that about the character, that she does everything in her power to make sure not only does he feel like, hey, you're part of the family, but you're wanted around here, and that this is what normal life should look like, even though his daily routine is checking for tracks of goblins.
Yeah. Checking the fence, see if it's okay.
Yeah,
the fence seems okay.
Right. Checking for tracks, checking for disturbances.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting comparison of how, we look at her, and maybe it doesn't come across right away, but she definitely went through a similar trauma to him, not in the sense of actually witnessing everyone die, but when it shows the flashbacks, it always shows her standing at the empty graves of her parents and stuff. And so it seemed like she was just as broken as him from the same event, the same incident, but for whatever reason, and it could have something to do with what happened to him immediately after and where he wound up. And I still don't fully understand the situation of how he winds up with the teacher he winds up with. But she did not have that. And I imagine because of their argument that they had, because they have an argument right before he gets left behind, he wanted to go with her, but she didn't. She couldn't take him with her. It wasn't her decision to make. And so he gets left behind and deals with the huge tragedy of a goblin invasion. And so how guilty would that make her feel for leaving him behind as the sole survivor to experience all that? Right? So there's this strange guilt that she must have as well. And that was kind of one of the redeeming qualities that she had, I thought, as a character. The other was just being cowgirl.
I think, to me, she represents Goblin Slayer's last shreds of humanity. She is the Bruce Wayne aspect to his Batman. And that there's a reason he lives on that farm with her, and that is to protect that. But as a character herself, she doesn't really do much, and actually makes one of the most infuriating choices I've ever seen in anime, that I tried not to get too nitpicky and ragey about, but I was like, literally, you're not helping in any way whatsoever. There's literally no logical reason for the decision you're making.
Oh, you're talking about the last episode's decision.
Yeah.
Right? I knew exactly why she did. She was trying to force him to go with her.
Yeah, force his hand. But still, yeah.
What? No. What? Let's talk about it when we get there.
Okay.
That's enough probably for Cowgirl. So yeah, basically we kind of see his mourning through her eyes, and then we see an old man bring a new goblin quest to the guild, and we see guild lady, who is another female character who has a crush on Goblin Slayer because she likes the strong silent types that she can't see.
Yep. Thank goodness it's not just real ugly underneath that helmet. Right. That the whole time.
Well, we don't know. We never see his real face. Everyone says he's handsome, but we never actually see.
We never see his eyes, but we see his mouth and nose.
Jeremy goes, "Is he a goblin under there?"
I really thought he was. I thought he's either a half goblin or a whole goblin or something. Like, the hobbs, they're human size. So I was like, is he a wandering goblin that has a vendetta? And I had like this whole conspiracy story about how the girl, this flashback was all about her history and had nothing to do with him, and that white-haired boy was a total red herring.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
The thought crossed my mind, but I do absolutely love it at the end of the anime when he takes off his mask and one character goes, "I thought he was going to be a goblin."
Yes, I was like, that's me. They knew what they were doing.
They absolutely did.
Yeah.
Basically, in this episode, he takes on this job, which is a tree castle that has been infested with goblins, which he then manages to set on fire with fire arrows with the help of the priestess. And then she uses her new spell, which is like a shield wall, to trap the goblins inside with the fire. And she has this question of like, her spells are miracle prayers from the goddess, right? She's like, why would the goddess give me the power to trap goblins inside a burning building? That's kind of messed up.
It's the power of 25 healing spells that you don't have to cast now because they don't hurt people.
Well, it's interesting because she has this cognitive dissonance of my spells are to help, not to hurt. Yeah. But the thing is that
Goblin Slayer sees tactical.
Right, no, well, the other side of that I don't think a lot of healers in stories have to deal with is I'm healing the mechanism that's going to go kill whatever. So is your healing really helping, or are you helping
to do damage?
Right.
You're loading the gun.
Exactly. So
it's not firing it.
I like that they addressed it so early with her.
Yeah, apparently they don't take the Hippocratic Oath.
No. Or if they do, it's only for humans.
That's right.
He does talk during the whole attack. He does talk about his past. And he talks about how his sister was basically goblined in front of him while he hid under the floorboard. So he knows everything that they do.
I like that.
That's not. I just don't want to say the word too much.
I know, but I think it's actually a great term to like use outside of Goblin Slayer if you're referencing it. That's actually a great term.
Okay.
They made her their plaything.
So. Yes. Yeah.
It's funny because he meets characters who have gone through that, or people who know about that, and he'll be like, "Yeah, I know. I've seen it live." And I always thought the man, like, was he hiding in a cave? And he's like, no, he watched his sister. And when he says that, he's talking about that day with his sister. Mm-hmm. And then in the next episode, we get 3 new characters who will become Goblin Slayer's party members, which I really found these guys interesting. We have, first off, the High Elf, the Elven archer of the group, who is 2,000 years old but wants to see the world. What do you guys think of her?
Out of the 3, she was my favorite, and I think because she had the highest amount of character growth out of the 3. And she also, I think, had a lot more dialogue as far as just in the group, and also her wittiness when it came, because she was the one that in the like first priestess goes, okay, no fire, and she's like, no poison, no water, no explosion. She's interesting because she is 2,000 years old. She's very haughty, and when it's mentioned, oh, we're going to go fighting goblins, she has that very same attitude that the first level characters did in the first episode of this, they're beneath me, I don't need to do this, and then she comes to find the horrors of it real fast.
Mm-hmm. I was really surprised. I didn't think they were going to go the direction they did with that. But I was glad they did too.
Yeah.
She was kind of, I liked her, but at the same time, I don't know, she kind of bored me a little bit. Like, she was funny sometimes. She cracked me up a few times. Like, I loved it when she kicked him in the back because he's like, they just finished defeating some goblins and he followed the rules. And so he like counts them off on his fingers as they're walking out, like no fire, no explosions, no poison or whatever. And her response is just to kick him in the back. And I guffawed at that. That was fantastic. Hysterical. But I think my favorite was probably the lizard man because he loves cheese and that's all it took. Like just the nectar of the gods. And he was dressed like an Indian, like a Native American. That was awesome. I loved the choice. And I kept thinking, okay, every time I'd see a character, who is this? Like, what is their class? What are they? And I think he's a druid. Does that seem right?
Druid or shaman? One of the two.
Yeah, I was thinking shaman.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Now, these 3 characters, they're not part of the guild, so they don't have ranks, right?
I think they say that they're silver because...
Are they all silver?
Yeah, when they first introduced him, they're like, wow, he's silver? We're all silver.
Yeah, they are adventurers. They do claim that they are adventurers. They were adventurers hired by their individual nations to represent them to ask Goblin Slayer to help with a issue brewing with goblins.
Which really surprised me because when they do get into the big combat with a oversized champion goblin later, they don't handle themselves as well as other silvers that we later see. It's not just Goblin Slayer that does Goblin Slayer that doesn't seem quite up to dealing with the champions. That was just a real big surprise to me.
So you're absolutely right. They are silver.
Okay. High Elf, I liked, but she was pretty tropey. She was pretty on point, Sudari kind of character. And it's always interesting when they make the wise old elf naive.
Yeah.
Because they just don't ever leave their home. And her big thing is like, I want to go on a real adventure, and we keep having to do this goblin stuff.
Right.
My favorite character was the dwarf, because that is a sassy man who owns his shortcomings. Like, you're a short and fat. He's like, no, dumb, a dwarf. Let's do this.
Have you tasted my fire water?
Yeah, and the fact that he was always willing to get back at the elf and challenge her.
Their tit for tat was pretty great to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I did like the lizard man. I especially liked his thing of like, I hope to do great someday and just become a dragon. When everyone else has mentioned that dragon is like the ultimate thing an adventurer can kill.
Uh-huh.
And
it's
I was like,
I want to be that.
Wait. So maybe there's good dragons and bad dragons.
Yeah. Silver. Cool.
Yeah. So they have a meeting with Goblin Slayer where they're basically like, look, demons are taking over the world right now, but there's also an issue that because everyone's so busy with that, no one can deal with this goblin infestation in the elf land. And at first he's like, demons, I don't care. No, nope, wrong guy.
Well, actually, I love the exchange here, because she's like, the capital's being taken over by demons. He's like, are there goblins there? She's like, well, not there. And he's like, okay, then I don't care.
Yeah, this is the conversation we've all referenced a few times already too.
Yep.
But yeah, they asked him like, hey, can you help us kill these goblins? He's like, yeah, sure. You said goblins, I'm in. At the same time, Priestess, who wasn't allowed to be in the conversation, meets some of the other adventurers. And I have in our notes to talk about the witch, who kind of plays a very prominent role, especially in this scene and a couple other. And she's worked with Goblin Slayer before, helped him find a scroll. But this is a good time to talk about the other adventurers, because there's the elf, or not the elf, the spearman. Mm-hmm. There is the greenhorn, the guy who loses his sword. There's the other swordman who's like slightly better than him, but they're friends. They're teammates, and then also the guy who looks like Guts. I really love that these all look like main characters from other animes or other main side characters, and it seemed very on purpose. Like any one of these guys could just have an anime about them suddenly, but it's not their story.
Yeah.
Spear guy looks exactly like I could take his character out and go place him in a Fate anime.
Yep.
Any other Fates.
Oh yeah.
And the witch reminded me of Soul Eater. The cat girl. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, now I'm going to think of her name.
But the witch I found interesting. Blair?
Yeah, it was Blair.
Yeah. The witch I found interesting because she definitely liked to view what was going on from the outside, and just kind of poke her nose in just at the right moments. But yeah, the scroll thing was great. I thought it was great payoff too, because she's like, yeah, he's a weird one. He had me help him with like a scroll. I don't know what he really is going to use it for. But yeah, it's just such great payoff. But the way she talked was a little irritating at first.
I was going to ask what you thought of that, since you watched both. Like, did they do a good job showing the same kind of manners?
It was easier to palate in sub than it was dub.
Oh, interesting.
In sub, it felt much more poetic, and in dub, it just felt deliberate and
the Little Valley Girl.
No, more condescending.
Okay. I think what do you define Valley Girl? All right. The after all these meetings have taken place, we see the group on their way, and we get a camping scene where they're all out that night and they actually talk. And this is very you can kind of tell this is like a first thing for Goblin Slayer. Everyone's like, you should be talking to us. And he's like, oh, right. How are you? I have cheese. I did love the part where they start talking about, where do you guys think goblins come from? And he tells them, well, my sister always said they came from the moon. And one big thing of this anime is they're always showing the green moon in the sky. There's two moons. There's a red moon and a green moon. And that seems to be accurate.
It's implied, but I don't think it's ever expressly
proven, right?
Yeah.
But it made me wonder if like the green moon is goblins and the red moon is the demons, and
which the red moon's smaller or farther away, one or the other.
Seems
So
farther away.
the bigger threat seems to be the more imposing green moon.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the Goblin Lord or the Demon Lord only comes once every 10 years, which seems really often for a Demon Lord.
It's almost like every iteration of a video game sequel.
Yeah. And then from there they enter the ruins. I love the elf shooting the arrow and killing 3 people with one shot.
Oh yeah.
That was a cool scene. But then they enter into the ruins. This is, I think this is the episode where they mentioned the gods rolling dice, and then I realized, like, at the end of every episode, you hear dice roll onto a table.
Yeah.
Good atmosphere.
Again, that's when I was like, oh, we're definitely watching a tabletop RPG happening, and that didn't happen, so I was wrong.
Apparently, it's a tabletop RPG where they just roll the dice and then throw them away. They just keep fudging the dice because, like, even at the end, that's one of the things that they point out is like, dice can't hold him back. You can't.
Well, yes and no, but that kind of comes back into play with his training session. So I'll save that. He does now. One thing he points out that the girls have to be covered in goblin blood. Which is
great. I love
elf girl.
And yeah, Priest is like, you get used to it.
Yeah. See, now I loved this, but it's a tiny nitpick of mine because it kind of stops happening in later fights where they have to go down into goblin lairs or confront goblins elsewhere.
They say in Watertown because the sewers are so rank or something that it doesn't need to happen.
I love it. Everything's so generic in this anime that the town that they go to that's on the water
is just Watertown.
Which I thought it was a what is it? What's the D&D town?
Waterdeep.
Oh, yeah, I thought it was a play on Waterdeep, but then it's like Watertown, and it's above, like, yeah.
It might be because Waterdeep's a big
labyrinth of underground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and that's where the Sword Maiden lives, and so that's actually a pretty good reference. Yeah. I think that's accurate. But yeah, they do say they have some throwaway line about like, oh, thank God things are so smelly and damp down here that we don't have to cover our smell.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
While they're down there, Goblin Slayer gets a little worried because they're not finding shaman totems, but they are finding complex traps. And he's like, okay, that means there's something smart down here, but it's not what it usually is. So we should be careful. Mm-hmm. They find this giant... What is like a hall? Like it's huge. It's this huge room, like, stories high. They're up on like the balconies. It's like a spiraling balcony all the way up.
Right before that, actually, they're like trying to decide which way they go, left or right. And the dwarf's like, oh, they're definitely to the left. And Goblin Slayer points his sword to the right. And he's like, we're going this way then.
Oh yeah, and they find one of the prisoners.
Yes, and
they manage to save her and get her out of there.
Yeah, and they were all amazed at him, like, how'd you know to come this way? And it just kind of shows, again, his experience that he's been doing this for so long.
What video game player goes the way you're supposed to go? Right?
That's true.
You always go the other way. But yeah, so they get to this big hall, and they do 2 spells at the same time. First, the dwarf does his fire wine spell, and then the priestess does another spell, and it puts all the goblins to sleep. So then they just go down there and stab them one by one.
Brilliant. I loved it.
And then this brings the attention of an ogre who's been leading these goblins, and he attacks. Goblin Slayer's like, "You're not a goblin. you're like, I'm an ogre. I don't know anything about you."
he almost looked like, oh, he's not a goblin. All right, guys, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. I'm not going to fight this. No point.
He actually gets hit in the battle and is sent flying, and the priestess has to give him some potions to help him get up. And then while everyone else is trying to fight him and distract this ogre, he walks up to the ogre, and the ogre is getting ready to do this big spell on him. He's like, "Hey, look at my scroll." And he opens it up, and all we see is a blinding flash and then the ogre getting cut in half. And we find out that this scroll is a teleportation scroll, and the other end of it is linked to the middle of the ocean where the water pressure is so high. As soon as he opens it, it's like just a blade of water shooting out.
Such a brilliant way of using an old D&D escape spell. Like,
right.
Fantastic.
So good. I loved how the ogre says, "You were going to use this on goblins?" I was laughing so hard.
And then from there, they kill off the ogre. They meet the elf ambassadors who are like, "You guys did a great job. We don't care." And they ride back home.
Yep. They literally don't talk to them.
They just get the caravan.
This one thing we didn't comment is like how traumatic this was for the high elf girl, because she realized like, oh my gosh, they're doing this to my people, and
this was close by to my home.
Yeah, it definitely kind of affected her, and it makes her respect what Goblin Slayer is and what he does, because now she gets the full scope of what is going on with these goblins.
Well, there's one point where she's dispatching those sleeping goblins, and she can't get a good grip on her weapon anymore because her hands are so covered. And she's like, how does he do it? Like, what am I doing wrong? And she watches him pick up a weapon off the ground, get one, leave it in him, and then go get another weapon and then get him. And she's like, oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, I thought it was also telling how she would go up to the body and she would just repeatedly stab the single goblin body just over and over to show how upset she was.
Because the girl that they saved was an elf.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it really shook her.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, this basically like, it's that thing like, yeah, you hear about those crimes in those other places, and then to find out like this is in my home, this is in my area.
That could have been me.
Yeah,
exactly, or someone I care about. Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is something that this does really well, because all the like we point out, the other adventurers treat Goblin Slayer as like an oddity. He's weird. No one quite gets why he is the way he is, and then to see these characters kind of like, oh, I get it now.
Right. They're horrible. They need to all be exterminated now.
In the next episode, it's kind of a lighter episode, a breather for Goblin Slayer. We find out the priestess is getting a promotion. She takes her test and she goes up one rank. We get a side story of the Greenhorn adventurer and losing his sword when he stabbed a rat, and the rat runs away. So he's basically going around to all the other adventurers being like, I need a sword to go get my sword back.
The rat actually got eaten. He killed that sword. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I love when he asks Spear Guy, because he's like, yeah, I have definitely a ton of extra weapons, but you can't wield them. And not because he didn't think he could, like, physically, like, stat wise, because this is throwback to D&D. You don't have requirements for all the extra weapons I have. I'm sorry.
Yep. This really reminded me of Diablo.
Right. Oh, level require 56. Sorry, you're only 30.
What's your dex?
Right.
He eventually comes up at the advice of the guild lady to ask Goblin Slayer what he thinks. And Goblin Slayer's like, "Why are you killing goblins?" He's like, "No." Oh,
why are you talking to me then?
Yeah. But he gives him the advice like, "Why don't you use a club? They're cheap, they're effective, and
they don't dent or
chip. They don't take damage like swords do, and so it's a good way." And that's what he does. He takes that down, he goes down to the thing, and he beats a couple of rats and a cockroach to death until he gets his sword back. And then we see the rest of the Adventurers Guild celebrating. Hey, the Greenhorn got his sword back, yay! And Goblin Slayer just doesn't care.
They didn't kill goblins with it.
Yeah, what's the point?
There's also the episode where he sits in for the promotion. He's not a judge, he's an observer. The guild lady's like, "Hey, can you sit in on this?" He does, which is interesting because basically this was a scout, and he's like, "Hey, I did a great job." I'm like, "You just got super rich and your party didn't, so you scouted a little too much and didn't tell your party you found something." So they kick him out of the guild, and I thought for sure this was in a story beat that would come back, and it does not.
I did too.
I thought for sure this guy was going to like cause a problem.
Yeah, try to assassinate her. I mean, they gave you all the indicators that that's what was going to happen next.
He's like, you're gonna regret this. I doubt it.
I thought it was a smart move with the story, the tight story they were trying to tell, to not introduce something a little more complex.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of an effect of like I said, everything feels like it could be its own story. This character is having his own stories elsewhere. Every character in this world feels like they're at the star of their own story, and we just for some reason are looking at this one guy who would normally not be paid attention to by anyone because no one does pay attention to him.
And we only got 10 minutes of screen time with him.
Yeah.
So would you say there were no villains?
Oh, the goblins were definitely villains.
True. I guess I mean no major villain.
Antagonist, like a actual antagonist to
that stuck through the whole episode, the whole season that we were introduced to.
Yeah, honestly, we're about to meet the Sword Maiden, who I thought was going to be our antagonist.
I did too.
But yeah, no, I don't think there is an antagonist here.
Yeah,
she has some qualities that are comparable to cowgirls.
Yes, she did.
Sorry, Troy, I couldn't resist.
Okay, so to bring it back around,
around.
The Goblin Slayer receives a letter for a quest from the Sword Maiden, and so he's like, "Hey, I'm going on a quest." The three. Oh, in the next episode, we just get a scene of 3 women warrior battling an evil cult. It's not explained. It's out of nowhere, but they will end up being important later.
It's literally a 45-second scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought this was like some kind of story that we were going to get recounted, like a bard story or something, of some legendary thing that happened a long time ago that was going to play into effects. Yeah, that's not it.
The first time. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think it does play into something.
Mm-hmm.
This is in this next mission. They keep mentioning like someone had to orchestrate this. Someone's behind this. And I think these heroes are battling the evil cult that set up a labyrinth of goblins in the city and help them out. Yeah. But Goblin Slayer doesn't care about them.
Well, it's funny too, because the first time I saw this scene, I was like, oh, these heroes are going to meet up with Goblin Slayer and they're going to have some sort of big, enormous battle, which never happens. And I was confused at first, but then I ended up loving that fact that we've got this immense epic story happening somewhere else. And I can believe that it was amazing without sacrificing how good this local story is.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
So after that scene, we then travel to Watertown with the party, which is now High Elf, Dwarf, Lizard, and Priestess and Goblin Slayer. And they meet the Sword Maiden, who is one of the warriors who helped defeat the last Demon Lord. And she is
also what Priestess is attempting to aspire to, right?
Yes.
Yeah. They're similar classes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they look very similar. I think when you pick the Priestess class, you get a blonde girl. Man, this could literally just be like an old video game.
Right.
But yeah, like I said, so she's a famous legend. She beat the Demon Lord. She wears a blindfold because she's mostly blind. And she's like, hey, there was an attack. And we found a body that was mutilated, and then we found goblins later, so we think there's a goblin infestation. We heard you're good at this, so we would like you to take care of it. And she gives them an old map of the sewers and kind of tells them, like, there's probably ruins down there and stuff, so you'll have to deal with that.
What's interesting is if you're paying really close attention to the rules that Goblin Slayer has laid out about the behavior of goblins, instantly, when I saw that the body was left in the streets, I was like, that was not a goblin.
Yeah, it didn't make sense.
Right.
It was a girl. Goblins wouldn't leave girl bodies in the streets.
Or kill them right away.
Mm-hmm.
So they go down into these sewers, and they fight a couple goblins, and then they're attacked there's a stream nearby. They're attacked by a boat, and these goblins attack on boats, and so they have to battle off this boat. And that's kind of important because, again, Goblin Slayer's like, someone had to show them boats. They don't invent boats, but they can figure out how to use a boat if you show it to them. So how did they figure these ones learn about boats?
Yeah, he keeps saying that line over and over, that they're not smart, but they're not completely fools either.
Yeah. See, and that to me, I kept thinking was a clue about him being smart enough. Like he was being humble bragging, you know?
Oh.
It definitely could be a red herring for you.
Right.
Look, I wouldn't have been surprised if you were right. There's nothing really super obvious except for later we do get a bunch of scenes with him with his helmet off even before the big helmet off scene.
Let's not recount the whole fight scene, but like I just have to call out, they jump on the boat, it's killing goblins, and Dwarf summons this huge rock to like sink the boat. They use the leverage of the boat getting hit by this thing to jump back onto like the side. I thought that was brilliant. That was such a great scene.
I liked when Goblin Slayer and Lizard jumped down, and Goblin Slayer's like, "Don't worry about it killing them. Just it's easier just to knock them off." And Lizard's like, "Great idea!" and swings his tail and takes out like 6 of them.
Yeah, because they were wearing armor. They don't usually wear armor.
Right. After this, they're attacked by a giant white alligator, which they run from. But then there's goblins up ahead, and they trick these goblins by putting a light on the alligator's tail into attacking the alligator, and the alligator wipes out those goblins.
I love as they're running. He's Dwarf is like, "Hey, Lizard, he's part of your family. Talk to him."
Yeah.
There was that elf that said it to him. Anyways, he's like, I don't know.
No. As good as that line was, the better line is the Lizard's response. Because instead of just being like, "That's offensive to me," or that, we're not the same family, which he does eventually say. His first line is, "I haven't talked to my family in a long time."
That was pretty great.
They go back up. So this is like a long-term mission, right? So they have to keep going down. So they're back up at the Sword Maiden's place, and the priestess is taking a bath and is joined by the Sword Maiden for some fan service scene. And she mentions like Goblin Slayer is eventually going to disappear. Seems to be a theme that for an adventurer like Goblin Slayer, eventually the only end is his loss.
I wonder if she found comfort in her companions that killed the Demon Lord 10 years ago, and her most leaned upon adventurer that she used as comfort and as a rock either died because he continued to adventure or disappeared, and that now she's just she sees a replay of her early life in these two.
I like that. That's cool.
This made me think of Batman, because what is Batman's ultimate fate? Eventually he has to lose.
Right.
Yeah. Except for in the Batman Beyond cartoon, which totally goes against that. But with as psychotic as Batman is, as singly minded devoted as he is, he will go until he loses. Like he can never beat the Joker because he can't. He can stop the Joker, but he can never fully defeat the Joker while staying Batman. So eventually the Joker has to win. It's just eventually.
Right.
And that's what I feel like they're saying with Goblin Slayer, that his ultimate fate, he'll never stop hunting goblins, and eventually one of them will get him.
But can the Joker really ever kill Batman?
He kind of looks like a goblin.
Okay, topic for another discussion.
I see the bait in front of me, and I'm like, back away. We have a podcast. Okay. Before they go down again, he goes and buys a canary because he heard a story from a miner that you use canaries to, which is true. They used to take canaries down into coal mines. Everyone knows that. So
this is interesting. It sets it up because he does this multiple times throughout the anime. He seems to have more of a social interest than is let on in the anime, because he seems to have a lot of off-screen or before anime conversations with people that he tends to he just remembers these little tidbits that most people just don't know.
Well, and it almost seems like he knows exactly why he's asking the questions he's asking, because he's like, I wonder if I can use this to kill goblins.
Right.
How do you make ice cream?
Can you
I can kill a goblin with that.
I think the ice cream one is important because I think you're absolutely right. I think every time he asks these questions, he's thinking, how do I kill goblins? But when he goes to find the ice cream, I don't think he can, at least not in the way I've thought of so far. And I think that shows a little bit of growth. Like for the first time,
that's a good point.
He's learned something for him.
And he actually intends to use it later to just make ice cream.
Right. Which I think has to do with he's now with a party of people who understand his objective. He's not alone in this. His lie is that I'm the only one who understands the threat of the goblins. And as people join him in his quest, he's starting to regain humanity or becoming less of a robotic character, right? He's okay. There are other people. I'm not alone in my mission.
Right. Because since his tragic childhood, his humanity was stripped from him.
Right.
And so this is definitely a story about him regaining it.
Right. They go down into the catacombs again and actually fall for a trap. They find another victim, but this one's already dead. And then gas actually comes in the room. The canary starts to sing. So they put on masks and they start plugging the holes to
I love how he goes, hey, dwarf, I know your power set. Use these to make concrete. Like, he's prepared with this stuff. He's like, oh, we're probably going to get gassed. We can plug the holes with this.
Right.
Yep.
This leads to a big battle with a champion. I'm trying to make sure this is the right one, but I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
And he actually gets just rocked in this battle. He gets slammed to a wall. Blood comes gushing out of the helmet. High Elf gets pinned down. The goblins are ripping off her clothes. The others are over one. Priestess panics and lets down the shield, which is why the goblins get past their defenses. And the champion comes at her, and she actually pees herself. I thought this was a really amazing scene because it, like I said, this shows her all her character growth of her gaining skill, and it just in a moment of panic, it all just flies away. And I was like, this has to be a dream or something. This got so bad. They went so far with this. I was like, this can't actually be happening. The champion picks her up and bites into her. It was bad. But Goblin Slayer gets up, grabs the hair of the dead person.
Is this where we first see that dice throw? The imagery of the dice slowly moving?
I believe it is. Yeah.
I wonder, this is just a theory of mine, when he got hit and then we see the imagery of the dice, is that a critical failure?
Yeah, one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, we get the one eye that's glowing, and now we've got the glowing red eye on the die. Does he get stronger with critical loss?
No,
I wonder if that's an interest. I wonder if that's on a stat sheet.
I bet it is, because what it says is that when the gods roll the dice, he doesn't pay attention or he doesn't care, and that would be a very interesting way to play it as a home rule.
He's totally Vegeta. No,
no. I think it just shows what they said at the end that he doesn't care. He can critical fail and he's going to win anyway.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter to him what the dice say. He's going to think he doesn't break the rules of the game. He figures out ways to win the game outside of. He's the guy who does when you're game mastering. He breaks your game because you're like, no, you're not supposed to be able to do that. Well, the rules don't say I can't do that. Right. I'm a bird alien and I can have rocket boots. You can't stop me.
I was wondering if you bring that up.
I told you Goblin Slayer reminded me of Jeremy in certain ways.
So back to the hair thing. When they first entered this chamber, they thought they saw another tortured person, but it was just a corpse. But it decayed so much, it was a skeleton, and just the head of hair fell off. Yeah. And so, he picks it up.
And strangles the champion.
And he makes this comment. He's like, this is why assassins use it. It's strong.
Hair is good for choking. He doesn't kill the champion, but he does then gouge out his eye and
throw it at goblins to scare them off.
He freaks out the goblins, and the goblins all run away. And then...
Is it you?
he ends up collapsing next to the priestess, and there's a really interesting. I don't know if I liked it or not.
I loved it. It was so brave. It was so weird.
The canary point of view.
Yeah.
The bird's eye. Well, it's just so long.
Yeah.
There's a whole song, and I was staring at like, is something happening that I'm missing, or is it literally just?
It's making you absorb the moment. Like,
yeah.
He dies. He dies. That's the end of his story. That's it.
He does actually die. That is actually true.
Yeah.
But he comes back to life because of a resurrection spell of sleeping naked in a bed with a virgin.
Which I've never heard of that particular.
Never read that in D&D. This must be a home rule.
But looks like I need to go dying more. No.
Again, there's such a good story here, and then adding in certain elements for like really horny guys. It's just so odd.
I actually didn't mind that because, in the sense of what is a resurrection spell, right? I mean, whenever they talk about it in D&D, how do you justify being able to bring someone back from the dead, right? I thought this was actually interesting, an approach of like, well, what is something else you can't get back?
Well, the thing is, in most old school D&D, resurrection was a quest in of itself. Like you had to go find the gods and then beg for their mercy. And usually it ended up like transcending or transversing multiple dimensions in order to get to them. So this was, I think, a little shorthand because she was a priestess of the goddess. And also they mentioned because he was so freshly dead that this wouldn't have been able to work if they'd waited any longer.
His corpse hadn't started stinking yet.
Right.
I absolutely hated it.
I knew you would.
Okay. Look, I enjoy fan service. Like we had a request to watch High School DxD.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and as much as I would love to, I don't think it's right for the podcast, but I have watched it, and I've watched it for the very reason people watch High School DxD. I don't have a problem with fan service. I do have a problem mixing in my gritty realism and my fan service at the same time.
I think what grounded it for me, this particular scene, is like, she's like, did you see anything? He's like, don't worry, you didn't have any scars. Like, she had the blushiness, but he was so deadpan about it that he didn't sexualize the scene.
He's fine, but Swordman coming in is like, what's it like to wake up next to a naked virgin in me?
And I think the attempt from her, which, and then she's drawn without under coverings.
Yeah, she's doing the leg, the cricket move.
Right. But I think, again, his grounding of this is a serious situation. I've got a job to do and you're a distraction. Helped me not feel weird about the whole
I will say it's better because he's not like a horny perv enjoying the situation.
Right.
Plus,
if he was, this would have to be a comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, that she has the ulterior motive. At least the impression I got was that she really wanted him to kind of stay on as her personal bodyguard kind of thing.
Oh, she totally wanted a replacement.
Yeah.
In my theory, she wanted a replacement for the guy that she lost.
I could totally see that. And everything that she said seemed to really sell that she was trying to hook him. She was trying to make him want to stay with her. And that line to me just came across as like her throwing an easy one out there. Like, hey, you're like waking up next to me is stay. Come on. I have nightmares.
Okay, let's talk about something that was really cool. This episode actually begins with showing his training as a young boy with the weird rat goblin guy.
It definitely was a goblin shaman, and it took me back to when he said, yeah, a good goblin, if you looked hard enough, you could probably find one. And I was like, are you the good goblin? No, maybe it was this guy.
Didn't it have whiskers?
I don't remember whiskers.
Yeah.
But
it looked like orange instead of green. It could have been the light.
It looked like a different like age or strain or something. I don't. It still looked to me like a goblin. It had the goblin eyes and everything. Nothing else has their eyes.
So the training is basically, I'm going to ask you 3 riddles. If you answer wrong, I'm going to kill you. He asked the first 2, and the boy, Goblin Slayer, gets them right. And then the third one is, what's in my pocket? Both a great Lord of the Rings reference.
Yes.
But it also, to me, shows why Goblin Slayer is so effective, and what this is trying to teach him is that I didn't break the rules of the game I set up, but I've now made it unwinnable for you.
Right.
And that's what Goblin Slayer does. He's like, okay, here's the rules of this world I have to play by, but I can operate within those rules in ways no one else has thought of and make it unwinnable for them.
What's in my
pocket? And yeah, also I was like, does he have the One Ring?
I totally had that thought as well.
Yes. Yep.
After he wakes up with and is resurrected, he goes and has a meal with his party,
which I thought was endearing. I think this is the first time that he's paused to think about other people in a social setting, and also to consider that other people are actually caring for him besides Cowgirl, because in this moment he asks, wait, you guys haven't eaten yet? And it's been days that they decided, you know what, we're not going to eat because we said we would have a meal after this mission together. And it seems to have affected him in the only real body language you could get from him, but it seemed to affect him in an emotional way of, oh wow, these people really do care about me.
Even though I assume they ate the lembas bread.
They probably had their rations just to make it.
She handed elf rations to Priestess. I'm like, that's totally lembas bread. I know lembas bread when I see it. Yeah, so they go to their meal, and then basically Priestess and Goblin Slayer stay in the town while they go scout the labyrinth again, and they get their gear fixed up and stuff, and they visit a blacksmith who's a creep, but they get past that, and then they have the ice cream scene where they eat ice cream for the first time. Goblin Slayer has it, and then asked, how do you make ice cream? And you learn that's how he knows so much. He does ask those questions. We've kind of touched on that already. The rest of the party comes back and they're like, hey, we did find something, we need your help. So they gear up and they go back down, and we get to see a beholder.
Yeah, and I love how he's like, they ask, what's it called or something. He's like, who cares what it's called? Call it whatever you want. I'm like, it's a beholder.
Technically, it was a discount beholder because it had no mouth.
Yeah,
you're right.
Mm-hmm. But they could totally get sued for that.
Yep. Going too far.
And so there's this room and this beholder with. Do they normally shoot lasers? Is that new?
Yeah, beholders have different spells out of every eye tentacle.
Yep, okay. And they do have disintegrate.
Yep. So they basically can't go in this room because this thing is guarding, and so they come up with a plan, which had to do with the spearman and witch delivering a bag of powder to Goblin Slayer, which is just flour, and he throws it out into the room.
At the beginning of the episode, while he's getting his armor fixed and stuff, he's like, oh, I gotta mail this letter, and he doesn't just tell what's in the letter. And yeah, it's, hey, Spearman, can you bring me a bag of flour?
That's his quest.
The flour here is too coarse. It's not as powdery as back home.
Uh-huh.
So he empties the powder into the room, and they trick the beholder into firing its laser at one of the lizard's skeleton familiars, yeah, and it sets off a giant explosion, killing the thing.
Again, she has to use protection to block the wall.
Yep.
And then inside the room is a mirror, and that is what they were really here to see. And when they look at this mirror, it has goblins in it. It's a goblin world, and this is like a portal that they are using to get into the city. And that's when Goblin Slayer was like, yeah, this is someone totally is setting this up. And again, my thought is that it's the cult for the demons. This is all like supposed to be a distraction, or hey, we'll set this up for later. Because they never actually reveal who officially put this mirror here. Like, they don't solve this conspiracy. They wipe out the goblins and they walk away.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out when it came to the Sword Maiden. Is it was clear that the Sword Maiden knew the mirror was down there because she knew what the mirror was. Maybe I'm just assuming. Maybe she simply recognized it from its description and was able to tell how valuable it was. But it seemed like she knew a lot more and was almost staging things.
We'll get to that because we do need to talk about that, but I can jump through this real quick and get us to it. Basically, once that this guardian demon thing is dead, the goblins come rushing in, so they have to fight him off. And that champion comes back. They follow Goblin Slayer's plan, which is basically, let's pull this darn mirror off the wall, put it above us, and then the dwarf will literally just bring down the entire ceiling and crush everything else.
Because before the explosion, he asks, "Are we outside the city?"
Yeah,
like dwarf's like, "Oh yeah, we're way outside the city." He's like, "Perfect."
Because there was something he wanted to do in another battle, and they're like, "We're literally right under everybody. You can't do that." He's like, "Okay."
It'd be worth it in the long run, guys.
So, but I like that. Like once the ceiling comes down, they're literally just outside underneath this mirror.
Yeah. I also love the fact that everything that fell through the mirror got shot at whatever speed it was coming down out through the other side of the mirror into the goblins that were all over there. That was great.
So they actually then cover it in cement and throw it into the water so they get rid of the mirror. He then confronts the Sword Maiden, and this is kind of what you were talking about, because he's like, you haven't been fully honest with us, and he mentions what Jason mentioned, that first murder, that couldn't have been goblins. You know that doesn't fit. And he points out that, or she had already told him that she had been a prisoner and goblined at one time in her life. That even though she's the hero that slayed the demons, she has this obsessive fear about goblins. So she's definitely involved in what's going on here, but I think it was more just framing the goblins to make it seem worse than they actually were, so that she could justify hiring Goblin Slayer. Because if she was behind this, I don't think he would just walk away from her and be like, "It's cool."
No. Especially if she was in cahoots with bringing goblins to this world. I mean, that would be high priority on his list.
Right.
I think she discovered there, because the white alligator, the giant alligator, is hers.
Yes.
And
they're familiar.
Yeah, and she sent it down there to eat goblins because she found out there were goblins down there. She's terrified of them, but she couldn't ask for help because she's the sword maiden. She has this reputation to uphold. And if she had to ask someone else to go down there, for one, the military is not going to, because they don't.
Well, there's a demon war starting. Like, they're busy.
Yeah. And so she couldn't put out a quest for it because everyone would go like, "Well, they're just goblins. Why don't you go do it?" So she needed to make it seem much worse. And so I guess she ended up murdering somebody.
Yeah, that's what I can't figure out. Is like, how did that go?
Yeah, I'm not sure who murdered the girl.
Yeah, I don't think she's a murderer, but I think maybe she took a dead body and mutilated it, or...
It wasn't just one, though, was it? Like, yeah, because other girls were just disappearing, and this was the first one that was found.
Or maybe there was just a regular murder, and then she framed, like, the next day they said they found goblins or something.
That's more plausible.
And then she would, maybe that was her doing, is being like, "Oh, look, guys, it's totally linked," and everyone's just like, "Okay, I guess so." But
yeah, it was very confusing, this part.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad it wasn't just me, because I was like, "Oh, it's totally you were walking away. It wasn't you." Okay.
Yeah, I think this was definitely her setting it up for the opportunity to hire a professional. Yeah. Because to protect her reputation, to protect basically herself from having to deal with it because of her abnormal fear for these things, because of being goblined.
And the confusing part is that they mentioned the past couple episodes, like, someone's behind this, someone's behind this, someone's behind this, and then he confronts someone and he's like, "You're not really behind it." okay. So we're not solving this mystery. We're just walking. Well, but that's Goblin Slayer, right? He doesn't care who's behind it. He cares about who the goblins are.
I do love that he's like, "This was you," and she's like, how'd you figure it out? He's like, oh, I was just going to go around asking everyone.
Yeah.
And she's like, wait, I spilled it that fast? I'm an idiot.
That was a good scene. Then they go home and he tells everyone he's going to learn how to make ice cream. And Lizard Man's like, yeah.
Can you put cheese on it?
And the episode 10, it's another kind of a slower episode. And this is really just kind of features more daily life. He actually, I love that he has to get his armor fixed, right? So he goes into the guild in regular clothes. And people are like, what's up, noob? What are you doing here? Who the heck is this pale guy? And not realizing they're talking to Goblin Slayer.
And I love that he's wears his armor so often he never gets sun exposure, so he's pale.
Super pale. Yeah, it's Spear Guy. It's such a funny exchange with Spear Guy. And it comes into play later too. And the witch, of course, winks like, yeah, I know who you are. But I won't tell your secret.
He picks up his new gear, which is identical to his old gear. He basically just keeps ordering the same set, and then when it's broken, turns it in for repair. Which is smart, you know?
Yeah.
He gets a letter. They have a big meal with everyone. The party all shows up. They invite Guild Lady, Cowgirls there. They basically just have all lunch, and they're just like, hey, we're all your friends. You have friends now. You need to not die on your missions. That's really important. Quit doing that. Don't do that again.
That was good.
They threatened to like punish him. And then we learned the hero has defeated the Demon Lord.
We're not even at the end of the anime yet, and side quest Demon Lord is dead. And I love that about this, because not only does it show, this important thing that happened is over, but we still have a credible threat we need to take care of. That I don't think most stories take into consideration is that once the big baddie's dead, well, what about all the other, kind of like in Star Wars, Emperor dies. Well, there's still an entire military out there.
They still have their whole fleet.
Yep.
The Aftermath novels do address that. Okay.
I love Robot Chicken's version the best. It's like, he died. Let's go home.
He goes back home and he reads the letter that he got, which is from the Sword Maiden, which is basically like, hey, thanks for doing that for me. I'm not having nightmares anymore. Everyone's having basically the town is celebrating, the guild is celebrating because the Demon Lord's dead. Cowgirl and him just kind of hang out in the field and look at a starry night. And she really spends the time. This is where it really brings up the topic of like, what's the end for him? Because they mentioned at the guild they were doing like, hey, we're gonna bring in veterans who have quit adventuring to train newbies, and that'll help people. And she's like, what is his retirement like? And really kind of realizing there isn't one. At the same time, at the end of this episode, he finds a ton of tracks on his daily search. So then we get the worst decision ever made by a character in an anime. Goblin Slayer basically goes to Cowgirl and is like, look, there is hundreds coming. There is something super powerful out there leading them. They're coming to attack this farm. They're going to use it as a point to attack the town, which is, where the guild is.
His first word is run.
Yeah, you gotta run. You gotta run away. And she's like, I'm not gonna run away. It's like, do you have any idea what that means? She's like, I totally know what it means, but I know you're not gonna run away, so I'm not gonna run away.
This was, again, I feel, yes, it was a terrible decision. But in my mind, she cares so much for him that she knew he was going to stay behind even if she ran. So she was attempting to force his hand, be like, how much do you care about me? Because I'm not going to go if you don't go. If you care about me, you'll come with me, kind of thing. And
that's not it. She knows he's not going to leave. I think the only thing this serves in a purpose is that it makes him ask for help. There's no way he'll run, but
there's no way he'll ask for help.
Yeah, he won't face this alone if someone other than him is on the line.
That's fair. I like that a lot better.
I thought it was her way to basically, as she said, I left you behind once and you lost everything. I'm not going to leave you behind again and have you lose your life. And for me, that fit with the guilt that she'd already experienced, and that basically she was willing to murder herself. Like to redo the history. But I do like your idea better.
Look, if she's like, I don't want you to die here alone, she could at least like picked up a pitchfork and helped. Right? She's like, no, I'll literally just sit here and wait to die. That's a little different.
I don't know if that's actually fair, because at the moment there was no threat. It was coming within the next day or two. So her grabbing a pitchfork would just be a meaningless symbol at that point. And then the next opportunity she would have is when all of the adventurers showed up. So she never had the opportunity to pick up the pitchfork. Maybe she would have.
Still could have. Still should be hold on. You gotta have a pitchfork ready.
You got to have it at all times. It's like the same reason he wears his helmet.
We got to push it. We got to push here a little bit. So he has to go to the guild and basically, instead of posting a quest, he asks personally everyone for help.
Yeah.
He says he will give them basically anything they want. He will give everything except his life, because it's the one thing, because he already is dedicated to someone, or promised someone he wouldn't lose it. But he'll give anything else. And Spearman like kind of taunts him a little bit, but it's like, yeah, just buy me a drink and I'm in. Especially when
he's a nice guy with all of his other stuff. Like, he is a main party character.
Yeah, he's a hero.
Yep. He could probably have his own anime.
Which is so funny, because what does he say at the beginning when we're first introduced to him? I do this for the money. He doesn't do it for the money.
So at first the guild kind of gives him a hard time, but like I said, the Spearman joins him. His party shows up and joins him, and Guts joins him. Yeah. Everyone eventually joins him. And actually the guild lady is like, okay, the guild is actually going to make this a mission. You get 1 gold coin for every goblin you kill, and since there's going to be hundreds.
Gold is a lot of currency.
And gold's a lot.
Yeah.
So basically this big battle starts, and things go exactly according to Goblin Slayer's tactics. He tells everyone what to do, and they're winning easily. You know, the goblins show up. They're being led by a goblin lord, but they have prisoners on like wooden planks that they're using for shields, but they use the sleeping spell again and rescue the prisoners. They charge in with wolves, but they have pikes ready for them. And everybody's winning, but Goblin Slayer's not there in the fight, which is very important. And then Hobgoblin shot,
because we see all the action and then we get the explanation for the shots. I really liked that touch.
Mm-hmm.
I do like that everyone at least respects enough that, okay, this guy definitely knows how to deal with this. Like, we make fun of him for only killing goblins, but we should listen to him about how to kill goblins.
He knows that stuff.
Right. The hobgoblins and a champion actually show up then. So the veteran fighters step forward. 2 champions, or was it 1 champion and 1 really big hobgoblin? It was actually 2 champions.
Yeah, 2 champions.
So the veterans step forward, and the lower classes kind of fall back. And then the Goblin Lord runs away, and he's like, man, it's fine. I lost, but I'll start over. I'll go breed more goblins, and I can do this again. And he runs into Goblin Slayer in the woods, and Goblin Slayer's like, you don't have a nest anymore.
I love this scene.
I already took care of it.
So we get a couple of battles at the same time. First, we get to see the Guts and the Spearmen fighting champions and with their the other veterans, and they managed to kill the 2 champions.
And you get to see just how outclassed Goblin Slayer is to these other silver ranks.
Are they silver or are they higher?
Yeah.
No, they're
all silver.
They're all the same as him. Yeah. That's why I think his attaining silver rank is by grinding goblins. Like, if you're playing the game, he's grinding, and he's just like using tactics to overwhelm things that he's clearly not equipped to handle.
So they defeat their enemies, and then Goblin Slayer actually loses his fight. So the Goblin Lord, but then Priestess saves him with a shield, but then puts another shield right behind it, squishing the Goblin Lord. Now, the plan was for her to make a 3rd shield to really box him in, and I was really hoping she would make it like right in the middle, like that would have been really cool. But basically, the Goblin Lord starts begging for mercy. I'll never kill a human again. I'm so sorry. And Goblin Slayer just slits his throat. Like, nope, we don't take mercy here.
Yep.
And
No
But
goblin prisoners.
because she didn't listen and use the third spell like he said, she has one spell left to heal him and is able to help him get up. And they're able to return to the farm and everyone survives. So everyone then goes and celebrates at the guild. And this is where Priestess asks, why didn't you post a quest? And he says, because when there was a quest for my village, no one came.
Right.
And that's just what happens. And she points out, I think they would have come. People are good, which I think is really his character arc, his theme, is that he's not in this alone. He's not the only person who cares about the little things that need to be taken care of and cleaned up. And, not everyone only cares about the demon lord. And actually, we get to see the heroes walking through the streets that no one's in, and they're like, I heard something about goblins. I don't know. They actually kind of suck. Goblins are rough. Yeah, it's really good. Someone's taking care of that.
Yeah. That song we heard about the Goblin Slayer. It's really cool. He's from here.
And those are the same 3 women warriors we saw in that one episode fighting the cult. They are the heroes of the world.
Yep.
But yeah, then the guild's having a big party, and Goblin Slayer takes off his helmet, and everyone's just like,
starts gawking at him.
Yep, he just becomes the main attraction. And Cowgirl's like, is this weird? I see him without his helmet all the time, because he doesn't do it to hide his identity or anything. Like we said, he walked into the guild the other day with it off, doesn't actually care. He just is obsessed with wearing his armor. And that ends our anime. Any last thoughts on character arcs, themes, how the story ends?
I definitely think there's quite a few messages being told with this particular anime. I think it's a commentary and deconstruction on generic fantasy, specifically dark fantasy. But I think it makes a decent commentary on, just because the big bad guy was killed or destroyed, what happens in the fallout, what happens in the aftermath, the day-to-day. Just because 2 countries are not at war does not mean that the police job is done. Like they still have crime to deal with.
There's still goblins everywhere.
There's still real life goblins.
Yeah.
So I think this was an excellent deconstruction of that trope, where instead of dealing at that high level with the super powerful, we get to get down and just into the grime with it and be told a really good story in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really interesting. I wanted to look up just a little bit of the origins of this, and I stumbled across information that this was originally a ASCII art comic, a manga that was online, and somehow it incorporated fan feedback in the direction that the story was going to go. And I'm really curious about just how much that fan feedback affected the choices that we see in the anime, and how much they affected the choices in the manga, because apparently the two diverged a little bit when the manga started to get ahead of what the ASCII art online was at. But I couldn't find the ASCII art thing anywhere. I searched and searched and searched, and maybe my Google food just was not good enough. It wasn't up to the task. And so I would actually love to see some of the original art and maybe a translation of it, if it's ever out there. And I'll search for it again later. But if anybody knows where it is, I would love to see it.
For me, I just really liked, like I said, it had a lot of similar themes with Batman, but also everything Jason pointed out about, the when we watch these fantasy worlds and we walk away from the goblin bad guys because we've gotten more powerful, they're still there and they're still hurting people. And the fact that it dice and luck factor in so much. And at the end, he's like, I got lucky that everyone joined me. And she's like, no, it wasn't luck. It was people are good. And, you could have trusted them and they did the right thing. And I like that. I thought that was a cool theme. So let's go to our final reviews. Jason, you picked it. You've watched it twice. What are you going to give it?
I kind of wanted to give it a 4 just because of some minor nitpicks, but I'm going to give it 5. I really, really liked this anime. It was dark, it was gritty, and it just hit that fantasy spot for me. And it didn't feel like all the isekais we've been watching lately. It felt like just this, in the muck, but let's tell a great story. And it had all the things that I'm looking for. So yeah, I'm giving it a 5.
Well, we are going to be watching an isekai for the next episode. But for Goblin Slayer, absolutely loved it. I would give it a 4 out of 5. It doesn't quite make it to 5 for me. I'm not really sure why. I just can't really. I think it's the supporting cast of characters. They just didn't grab my attention the way that in some of the other anime they do. But overall, I absolutely loved it. I love the concept, and I really love the character.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 4 as well, for almost the exact same reason. I agree with you. They chose to be super generic for a reason. Like it serves a great purpose, and conceptually, I love that. But the storytelling does suffer a bit because of it. So I don't think it's quite like the characters I don't connect with as much as I would like to, and the storytelling itself took a while to actually get into, because it took a while to figure out what was going on, why this matters. I kept thinking to myself, why, what does this matter? And yeah, so just a 4 for me, but for the most part, this is a really good fantasy story, and I do like that they did something different, like deconstruct the fantasy series. Okay, so our next anime that we will be talking about is something about a slime.
That one time I got turned
Reincarnated.
Reincarnated as a slime. Is that how it goes? Yeah, I think so.
The one time I got reincarnated as a slime.
Oh, that one time, yeah. I love such long names.
This is a 2-season anime, so we'll be talking about it over the next 4 weeks. We'll watch the first half, which is the first 13 episodes, and then we will finish the rest of the episodes. We haven't even finished airing at the time of this recording, but it will be ready by the time we record for the second half. So just the first 13 episodes at first. We'll talk about it, and then we will finish that series.
Does he only dissolve clothing? Does he only dissolve clothing?
We will find out.
This actually has a little bit of a history with Baka Baka Baka. We did a mini-sode where we talked about anime we were looking forward to in the future, and Jeremy specifically called this one out, and I thought it sounded really stupid. And it ended up being one of the hits of the season when it came out. This is actually a really popular anime, and it'll be interesting to see how they treat their isekai world, because it is about a man who gets turned into a slime in a fantasy world and then finds out that slimes are OP if done right.
Yeah, I
love being OP.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like the slime on Orville. Oh my god, I love that.
I don't think it is, but it is a good show.
Good show.
So, if you have thoughts on Goblin Slayer or the other anime we're going to watch, the name is so long, the slime anime, feel free to leave it. You can leave it on our Twitter, @Baka Podcast. You can leave it in our email, the animebakaclub@gmail.com, or leave a comment wherever you found the podcast, and it will get back to us. Thank you guys so much for who have been responding to us. The comments have been absolutely great. Love it, especially our Twitter followers. You guys have been awesome too. So with that, I think it's time to say goodbye.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.
Sayonara.